Welcome to The Switch, not another podcast. The Switch is a collaboration between Baseload Capital and DNB, aiming to accelerate the green transition. We want our podcast to be a central hub for knowledge exchange within the fields of renewables and green transition. Hosted by Kristina Hagström-Ilevska and produced by Emil and Jacob. Meet Jeff Gustavson. A man who held positions in finance, mergers and acquisition, corporate strategic planning, supply and trading, investor relations, and upstream in one of the world's biggest energy corporations, Chevron, before he became president of Chevron New Energies. In this current role, he is focused on lower carbon business prospects that has the potential to scale, including commercialization opportunities in hydrogen, carbon capture and offsets and support of ongoing growing biofuels. Besides impressive and productive 24 years at Chevron, Gustavson sits on the external advisory boards for both the College of Engineering and the Department for Research and Innovation at the University of Colorado, and was recently appointed to the board of directors of the Chevron Employee Political Action Committee. Let's give a warm Switch welcome to Jeff Gustavson.
Welcome to The Switch, not another podcast. I am honored to have with me Jeff Gustavson from Chevron New Energies here today. I am super excited to talk to you. How are you today?
I'm great.
Yeah?
And you got my name almost perfect.
Yeah? I have to ask you, Jeff Gustavson. Gustavson is a Swedish name.
Technically, yes.
But are you Swedish?
No, I am not Swedish. I'm Danish. It's okay. We can still do the podcast.
Okay.
My father is from Copenhagen and immigrated to the United States in the 1950s. And he's 89 years old now and lives in Colorado, where I grew up. So I'm half Danish, technically.
A bit bummed, but it's okay.
Yeah.
We still love, the Scandinavians love each other.
That's right,
So it's okay.
Yeah.
You are now the president of Chevron New Energies, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. And you have a long experience within oil and gas.
A long career, 24 years with Chevron, started in 1999. I have a liberal arts background, so economics and finance, and an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin, and I started at Chevron right after that. Finance, planning, corporate strategy, upstream, downstream, midstream. I've worked in a lot of different places, and I took this role we're coming up on almost a year in this role in the new energy space.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that it's a dream job.
Dream job.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I started with Chevron, one of the reasons I started with a company like Chevron, a large integrated energy company, first of all, the traditional business, we refer to the traditional business as our oil and gas business, is a fascinating business. Global, very complicated, multidisciplinary, very, very important for the world's economy, for everything, makes everything go around. But I also knew that at some point in the future, there would be a transition, and that's exactly what I'm working on now, and that is one of the main reasons I started with a company like Chevron, to be a part of the transition, and that's the honest truth. I'm very lucky now. I get to really work in it in a much bigger way than I ever could have imagined when I started.
Well, we're already into that section now. Like it is a question that I had. How can actually Chevron lead the energy transition?
Yeah, so there's two ways. We talk a lot about delivering higher returns for our stakeholders. That is important.
And the stakeholders being?
Investors, employees, the governments, that we work with, but also doing so in a lower carbon way. So it's higher returns, lower carbon. And the lower carbon objective, there are two principles. We need to do everything we can to decarbonize our existing sources of supply, our traditional oil and gas business, but we're also focusing on investing in new lower carbon businesses, and the two are connected. There are things that we're working on in new energies that help decarbonize, lower the carbon intensity of our existing businesses, but also grow new businesses to help decarbonize other sectors of the economy.
Interesting. So how does the future, the energy mix of the future look when you are working with a new segment, you said?
I guess the energy mix is a mix. It will always be a mix. It always has been a mix. So obviously renewable sources of energy, geothermal included, will grow significantly, just like they have over the past several decades. But oil and gas and fossil fuels will still be a part of the mix, and a significant part of the mix. But we need to make sure that we have lowered the carbon intensity of those sources, and we're working very hard on that. There will also be new sources of energy. One that I love talking about, I'm actually made fun of this at the company at times when I start talking about it, is hydrogen. Hydrogen is a new energy source, very clean energy source that I think will be an increasing part of the mix going forward. But the energy mix, it's a mix. It takes all sources to make the world go round.
Do you think we will be able, I know that you said that we will have a cleaner oil and gas, but do you think that we will shift because now it's a big part of the energy transition? How do you think it's going to shift percent-wise?
It's a good question. I think, and it depends where you are in the world. From a developed country standpoint, crude oil demand has already slowed. COVID, obviously, it dropped significantly, and now it's come back in a big way. But over time, over the decades to come, oil demand in developed economies will slow. At some point, will flatten. Natural gas demand will continue to grow at a higher pace. But when you look at the developing world, we're just still developing economically, that equation will be different. It's hard for me to. There's a number of different forecasts out there, and we look at all of them as to where the future of crude oil and natural gas demand are going. And we'll look at all of those scenarios going forward. But I think when you look at 2030, 2040, even 2050, oil and gas is still a significant part of the mix. But it needs to be lower carbon. And there's a lot that we can do to decarbonize, and a lot that we've done as an industry to decarbonize a very important source of energy.
How is Chevron set up to do this? I mean, it's a big transition to be made. You can take a sip of your coffee. Don't worry.
Thank you.
There you go. Because I think it's quite interesting. It is a big shift we're moving into. And I know that we have the New Energies department, but how is Chevron set up to do this?
Yeah, there's a couple. So if I go back to those two focus areas, decarbonizing our traditional and growing new energy businesses, in the decarbonizing the existing, we start with a very structured, and we've been working this for many years, a very structured process where we assess the opportunities that we have to take carbon out of our traditional oil and gas business. So we think, we have 36,000 employees around the company, many of whom are involved in thinking of ways to lower the carbon intensity. They come up with ideas. We rank those ideas from top to bottom. How can we take the most carbon out at the lowest possible cost? And we fund those projects and we put those into action, and we've already seen results from those efforts.
So you're actually asking the employees. I love that. So the initiatives comes from there.
Yes, everybody. We have.
How can one initiative look like?
We have. Well, there's initiatives around energy management. Instead of using diesel fuel to run rigs in the Permian Basin, for instance, we have a large project there to use wind energy, renewable energy, and eventually solar power to run those operations, not just the rigs, but many of our operations. Methane management. Methane's obviously a very intense greenhouse gas. Monitoring our facilities for where methane leaks are occurring, and they do occur from time to time, and making sure that we're designing the equipment to limit that occurring. Flaring, flaring of natural gas. In some parts of the world, there's not a ready market for natural gas. You produce crude oil, and you end up flaring natural gas. Not just us, but some of our partners, working to understand how can we build out the natural gas infrastructure as quickly as possible to avoid flaring. Or in some cases, with regards to flaring, we'll make the decision to shut in our oil production to make sure that we're not flaring the natural gas, because that has an emissions impact. But these ideas, and we have specific targets. Folks need to understand what the target is. Targets around greenhouse gas intensity for our upstream, our downstream. In fact, everyone's compensation in the company is tied to our ability to make progress in this space. That's very important. That's a good incentive.
That's a very
for
good
folks
incentive
to work
that
on it.
I think that not too many know of.
Correct, although we have highlighted that for a number of years. We made changes a few years ago to shift in that direction. And that's really starting to, folks are first of all, folks are very interested in it, not just because it impacts compensation. Folks are interested in this in our company because they actually know that this is an issue. Climate change is an issue. And anything we can do to manage our emissions helps. So there is purpose behind this. Our purpose statement is to provide reliable, affordable, ever cleaner energy to enable human progress. So the ever cleaner part is a part of this. So folks are very motivated to work on this. But we start with that. We prioritize projects. We put money to those projects that reduce the most carbon. We want to take a very, the most efficient way to decarbonize. But we're also growing these new businesses, and there's 4 that I would talk about. Renewable fuels, hydrogen, I've spoken of that earlier, carbon capture, sequestration, storage, and then offsets. And in offsets, there are also emerging technologies, including geothermal is getting a lot of attention. Those new businesses, which are lower carbon by nature, also help with the overall decarbonization of not just our enterprise, but a lot of other sectors that are out there.
But I think that I read that you got $10 billion that Chevron is going to invest in new energy business and lowering carbon. Correct.
For the next about 8 years from now through 2028, we tripled our investment in the lower carbon space, $10 billion, an increase of $10 billion from what we were spending before. About $2 billion is earmarked for those decarbonization projects that I talked about. $8 billion will go to these new energy business lines, the 4 that I mentioned: renewable fuels, hydrogen, CCUS, and offsets.
That is an enormous amount
it's
of money.
A significant amount of money. We're serious about this, obviously, and there's a lot of work to be done. Now, that's just guidance. If we find opportunities to invest more in good projects, good companies, good technologies that help with carbon abatement, but also we're looking to generate attractive returns in these businesses as well, we may change that guidance. But that's a starting point for us today.
It pops up in my mind that, this is an enormous task to take on, and I think that the people that you have on your team are going to be crucial in this. How do you build a team to transition into something that we don't have the answers for yet, that we are not sure of how it's going to look? There are so many uncertainties. How do you think when you build such a team? Yeah,
it's my favorite question by far. The culture here is very important. It's obvious. The people are everything in our company. We build very big things. In our traditional business, we're going to build big things in these new businesses. But you have to have the right people, the right culture, the right organization to be able to do that. And in this space, this is new. That's why we call it New Energies. There are connections to our existing business. The reason we've selected these businesses to invest in is because we add something to these businesses. We have existing capabilities in the company, technical capabilities. If you think about carbon capture and storage or geothermal, we have subsurface expertise that is better than, it's top-notch, right, globally. We have hydrogen expertise, we have offsets expertise, we have renewable fuels expertise. So we can bring in capabilities from inside the company, match that with folks from outside the company. Very important to have a good diverse mix of thought and really get the organization focused on this. But these are new businesses, lots of risk. Not everything we try will work, and that's okay because we'll learn as we go through that process. That's a mind shift for folks. We need to move quickly in this space too. We need to partner differently. There's a whole list of things that we talk about today, but I think in the new energy space, we'll really challenge ourselves to
I mean, it's a completely different way of hiring, I guess, because it's more entrepreneurial.
One of our core values is entrepreneurial. Yes, folks that think we're in a big company. You need big companies to work this issue. This is a huge challenge. And I said this the other day on a panel I was on, there's an aspect here, we need to think like a small company in many ways. And we need to work just like we do with baseload capital with very small companies. And that's great. But there's a different way to do that. Small companies work very differently than large companies. They're more agile, they're quicker, they're more risk tolerant than maybe a large traditional company. So we're trying to, this is really a startup that builds off a large company and all the value that brings, but does it in a different way. And that's a big challenge for us. And that's something we're going to work very, very hard on.
Is this something that is close to you as a person? Is that your leadership, this entrepreneurial way?
Yes, absolutely. So going back to where I started, I worked in my father's company. There were 18 people in the company. And I actually never thought that I would stay at a big company. I joined a big company to get the big company experience almost 24 years ago, because I know there was a ton that I could learn. And Chevron's a fantastic company. But I didn't know if I would be able to make it as long, because I have a small company. I started with a small company mindset through my father. But there are enough parts of Chevron where you do feel that small company mentality, if it's a small project team or a smaller group somewhere in the world. And now with New Energies, this is a dream job for me. We have an organization. It's larger than my father's company. We're about 90 to 100 folks that works with the rest of the organization to get these things done, but it has a real small company feel to it, and I'm very attracted to that. I like to make decisions, quickly. I'm okay taking risks, in a calculated way. And I love the learning aspect of this. And so I couldn't be more excited about my current role.
What are your hopes and anticipations for the future? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I mean, we've laid out some aggressive, ambitious, I should say, targets for 2030. We see growing our CCUS business to 25 million tons in 2030 and much further beyond that. Hydrogen, we've laid out targets, 150,000 tons per year of hydrogen sold, really mostly new hydrogen, blue and green hydrogen, and maybe some other colors. I'd like to see us realize those ambitions. But I'd also like to see us do it in a way that we can generate attractive returns, that we can do both. Both help the decarbonization of our existing businesses, grow these new businesses to help decarbonize other sectors, but do it in a way that it makes sense for the company and it's sustainable, right, for the company, because we have stakeholders that require us to generate a return, a sufficient return in these businesses. So if we can do that, I'm happy. But I'd go back to your culture question. How we do it is very important. I want folks to look at New Energies inside the company and see that it's a different organization, that they work differently, going back to all of the things that I talked about, entrepreneurial, action-oriented, great partnerships inside the company and outside of the company. I want folks to really see that, inside and outside of Chevron.
It's going to be an exciting trip to follow these coming years, both with the very ambitious goals, of course, but also like bringing a team. You said 90 now. I can imagine that. I was talking to some of the other team members. They're hiring in a quite high speed as well.
I think we'll always be hiring in this group.
Yeah.
Outside the company and bringing folks inside the company. And folks inside the company, there's so much excitement for getting into this, getting more involved in this. We've been working in hydrogen for decades. We've been working in carbon capture and storage for many, many years. We've been managing offsets and renewable fuels for many years. But this is a different, this is its own segment within the company, and we're looking to grow these businesses to large size. And folks are very excited about that. So when we look to hire talent from inside the company, we have long lists of folks who are really interested in coming into New Energies. And then we have other folks in the company that might not be in our organization, but support us from other organizations. And that's necessary for us to be able to do this. And then I think we'll always be hiring folks from outside. It's a very competitive environment, but we have a really good product that we're offering folks. You get to come and work for Chevron, great company, great culture, but in a different way, in a startup within a large, stable, very successful company. I think that's a great combination.
And also with a very meaningful goal.
Yeah, there's a lot of purpose in this space for folks, both to help our existing businesses decarbonize, but help other hard-to-abate sectors. That's what we're really focused on here, the deep decarbonization, right? And that's where CCUS, hydrogen, and offsets really will add value.
I think it's an important task that you're heading on.
Now it's time for conscious questions.
So, what have you done good for the climate this week? Or have you seen anything bad done to the climate this week? Or do you have any guilty pleasure when it comes to the climate? Which one?
Well, so the third one seems a bit too personal for yet. Maybe the next podcast we can get into the guilty
I'm going to write that
pleasures.
up.
Okay, you can. But the first one, what have I done? And I'll start with one that you'll probably hit the button when I say this. But I honestly feel going to work this week. And this week in particular, we had Sarah Week here in Houston. And
I'm thinking if I should, but actually I'm not.
But I really believe that what we're trying to do in New Energies is going to have an impact, is having an impact, and will have a bigger impact on climate change and on decarbonization. And this week you could see it in spades. Sarah Week, very well attended right here in Houston. You were all there. All of the meetings that we had with our organization, many different levels within our organization, meeting with potential customers, partners, government representatives to talk about what we're trying to do, how we want to work on this together with all of these different entities, has an impact on climate. More personally to me, and I wasn't able to do this week, okay, so full disclosure, but last week I got back we just brought many people back, to the office post-COVID, or at the tail end here of COVID, and I biked to work last week, and that's something that...
Well, that's good. If I had an awesome button, I would push that one.
That's something I've done for
especially here in Houston, I think.
In Houston, it can be interesting in Houston.
Yeah.
But and some folks think, can you really bike to work in Houston? You absolutely can. You have to be a little more careful on these streets. You take back roads. But that's something I've done almost my entire career, many parts of the world, not just Houston. I lived in Calgary, I did it there. I lived in Aberdeen, I did it on the wrong side of the street and the wrong side from our perspective. And that's a small thing that I think has a huge impact. and not just on emissions, not taking your car to work. And obviously now many folks are driving electric vehicles, and that has a different impact. But the impact it has on your health and overall well-being. And I've always said if we could get more people to cycle, I mean it. And it's hard in this, depending on what city you live in and how far your commute is. I only live 6 or 7 miles
when
from
you
work.
come to visit us in Sweden, Stockholm, I'm going to make sure to take you on a bike tour.
In the middle of winter, right?
No. Yeah, but actually in Sweden there are bikers all year long. But let's plan it for the summer for my sake.
I would love to do that.
Good.
So that's a small thing that I'll try to do much more of.
I think it's a big thing, especially if we inspire more people listening to you now to do that.
I agree.
As well.
I agree.
I'm curious, so thank you for getting to know you a little bit better. I want to get to know the oil and gas industry a little bit better.
Okay.
If we take another perspective, not only Chevron, but like the industry in itself, how will oil and gas survive and thrive in this green transition?
Yeah, so I mean, survive is a little, I wouldn't say, stark word. Certainly the last 2 years have been very challenging for the industry. We had a period in 2020 when the price for the product that we sell was negative for a period of time. That's a significant issue. And now, of course, we've come out to the other side of this. So the markets, will go up and down over time. But we talked a lot about how you survive through a period of very, very low prices. And I think from a traditional business standpoint, being disciplined in your capital investments is very, very important and something we pride ourselves on. You can't invest in every project that's out there. You really have to be disciplined in the capital you put to work, and you have to execute safely and reliably and with costs in mind. So that's where it starts.
Can I, because I got stuck on something.
Okay. You want to hit the button?
Yeah, I just want to ask you something because you mentioned so the prices went from very low and now it's high.
Yes.
The green transition started when it was very low. Will oil and gas industry keep what they have been talking about? I mean, there is an initiative going. If, for example, oil and gas prices and you start earning very much money on that, will you, will it degrade the interest?
Yes, a great question and a fair question. The answer is yes. We take, we don't make decisions, especially long-term decisions based on the price. We take a very long-term view of price, and although prices will go down and up in the short term, in the long term, we have a view prices will be in a certain range, and that's how we make our allocation decisions. And we made the decision to invest much more heavily, tripling our investment in new energies at a time when prices were much, much lower than they are today. And now, just because prices are higher, we're not walking away from that commitment. This commitment is made, and when Chevron says that they will, when we say we'll do something, we pride ourselves on actually doing it. So we still take this as a long-term decision. We have these are businesses that we're investing in today, working hard on today, that will be very big next decade and then the decades to follow. So what the price is doing today will not impact the strategic path that we're on. But it is a fair question.
I also know that OGCI, Oil and Gas Climate Investment Fund, you went together, a lot of oil companies, and you've made a statement that you will together try to change the industry. Can you tell me more about that?
We're a partner with OGCI. I think those partnerships are very important. I think industry working together. We have a role. We want to lead in these new energy businesses and the decarbonization efforts that are underway in industry. Just like we lead in the traditional business, we consider ourselves a leader in the traditional business, and our goal is to lead in these new energies businesses, and that's not just about Chevron. We have a responsibility to help influence partners that we work with around the world through organizations just like OGCI. And I take that very, very seriously. There's very large companies in this sector and very, very small ones. The entire industry needs to move in this direction. And you mentioned, I didn't finish the survive, thrive. I talked about the being disciplined with our investment in the traditional businesses. We'll do the same in new energies as well. But transitioning is important, right? And that's why we're on the path that we're on. And it's not just lowering the carbon intensity of our oil and gas business, growing these we see there's huge opportunity in these new businesses, hydrogen, carbon capture offsets, and renewable fuels. So the announcement that we made, and we're starting with, it's a lot of money that we're investing in these businesses to go. I hope that these become much larger businesses. We expect that these will become much larger businesses over time. That's how we thrive in this, in any future environment, regardless of where prices are. And I think you'll see a lot of consistency in our strategy going forward.
You do have like a reputation that is still hanging over you. I was talking to one of your employees the other day, and he was a former employee of Google. And when he was approached by Chevron, many of his friends said like, "Oh, are you going to that side? Or are you going over to the other side?" And I loved his explanation. He's like, that side can actually do something. You know, it's quite interesting, but you still have a reputation being a bit of a villain. In a sense, you're blamed for a lot of things. How do you handle something like this in leadership and also like this transition?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't challenging to know that there is that perception out there. I do think it is the minority that really, feel to use the term, villain, but certainly that view is out there. I accept that. And yet you hate to hear that when you work very hard and you see all of the wonderful things that we're doing as a company and the wonderful people that you work with. To hear that in the criticism, it does have an impact. And I wish that could go away, but it is the reality of any industry, really, any company, any large company. But certainly in this sector in particular, there are folks like that out there. Look.
So in the end, it's a bit unfair. Do I understand you right?
Yeah, I think. It is, and I think we could do a better job always communicating. What we're doing, why we're doing it. I think there's a lot of education about the energy system and how it works and how it doesn't work. And you're certainly seeing that right now in the last couple of weeks with what's happening in Ukraine, which is absolutely terrible. And I hope it ends very soon, as everyone does. Folks are learning a lot about how the energy system works. Very practical matter here, and some of the importance of reliability of energy, affordability of energy, and clean, energy. All of those things are very important. So we could do more to educate and to communicate. And look, some folks will never convince, and that's okay. But I think there's a lot of folks that we could help in that regard. But that's one. The other one is we have to prove it. I can sit here and say we're serious, we're going to decarbonize the existing, we're going to grow new energy businesses that help with other sectors, that help with climate change more broadly. We're serious, we're spending significant money, but we have to prove it. So we have to execute, we have to build projects, we have to show that CCUS can work and we're going to be a part of it, or can work on a much bigger scale than it does today. We have to show that geothermal has a much bigger place in the energy mix, which it absolutely does. Hydrogen, offsets, all of these things have a role. Until folks see that we actually do it, there might be some doubt that's out there.
There is actually another way to answer this question, which is quite interesting. Would we even be able to do the transition without oil and gas?
Yeah. No, it goes back to the energy mix. It's always going to be a mix. Oil and gas is going to be a part of that mix for many decades. There is, remember, it's reliability, affordability, and ever cleaner. So making oil and gas, lowering the carbon intensity of oil and gas is a necessary part of the equation. So if oil and gas consumption is out there, and we believe it will be there for a very long time to come, we need to work to decarbonize that to help the overall energy equation. And we're doing a lot in that space. I like to say, we are a top quartile producer of oil and gas, both oil and gas. So we're in one of the cleanest producers that are out there if you look at all the production in the world from a carbon intensity standpoint. Yet, if you look at from 2016 to 2028, we found a way to lower our carbon intensity by 35%
Amazing.
in our upstream operation. So think about that. If there's a company or a source of supply that's in the second, third, or fourth quartile, how much room there is to decarbonize what we're already producing today. So that's one. And then I do believe that carbon capture is fundamentally a part of the equation, the solution here. Hydrogen's a part of it, offsets are a part of it, geothermal, renewables, all of these things are a part of it. We can bring something to these new sectors to help them grow that other companies, many will need help from a lot of other companies, but we bring skills and capabilities to these that are critical to make these businesses grow over time. So I think we're a part of the solution either way that you look at it.
It really goes together with our thoughts at the Switch Not Another podcast. I believe that if we don't get the collaboration working over industries, over segments, then we are not going to be able to do this transition. And it's more important now that we start seeing that it's not black and white, it's more of a grayscale. Yeah. And we need to hold hands through this.
I agree. And I think, people ask, how do you make these work faster? And technology, there's three things that I go to. Technology is a huge enabler. Investing in new technologies to bring the costs down to make these work. And that is something that's true of any industry. Obviously, technology is moving very quickly, and we're investing heavily in that space with companies like Baseload Capital and many others to drive that innovation. I think policy support is another very important enabler, working with governments to have the right policies to appropriately support these businesses, not pick individual winners, but provide broad support that allows companies and the private sector to really get into these, invest, and the innovation occurs, the technology advances and costs decline. And then the third one is what you said. We need to partner in a different way. We have partnerships throughout our traditional business. Many of our peer companies all over the world, we work together on upstream oil and gas production and downstream delivery of oil and gas. In this space, it's very different. Our partners now look very different in new energies than they do in the traditional business, and there's different mindsets. Partnering with I keep going back to Baseload, you have a very different way of doing things than a BP, a Total, a Shell, or an Exxon, or a Chevron. How you put those partnerships together, and then with the governments included in that, in all levels, federal, state, local level, how we really work together to solve this, and growing these new businesses is absolutely a part of that. We need to think differently about partnership. And that goes back to the cultural question. That's why the people and the culture are so important. This is a new space we're entering into, and we'll move faster if we work together.
I see you're fired up, and
you're
fired up, and you are ready for the next segment.
Okay.
It's your choice of conversation, something that you really get engaged about, something you would like to talk about and also send a message about. What would that be?
Well, it would be our people in the company, and seeing this group come together, not just the folks who are working in New Energies, to see the excitement, just that you see the excitement with me in this space. But when I interact with the folks who are now staffing this new organization, the energy that they have, and this is not easy. You're coming into a new group, brand new group that didn't exist before. We're working on refining the strategies. We know what business lines we want to tackle, and how fast we want to grow. We know what we want to invest, but working through this is difficult, right? And there's a lot of risk, and we're asking people to think differently about this. But to see them come to work every day, really motivated to take on that challenge, is very inspiring to me. And it's not just within New Energies. To see, and you'll know this group very well, and I'll just give a shout out to them, but there are many others.
You're doing your sunshine already now. Okay, good. Give it a shot.
Our Tech Ventures organization, Chevron Technology Ventures, is led by Barbara Berger, now Jim Gable. They've been working directly with, that's how we have the relationship with Baseload Capital. And I really am just so impressed. They're such an important organization. They've been around for 20 years in the company, investing in new technologies and things that are way out on the horizon. To now see all of that to be really here and now, I'm very, very impressed with that. With that group. We wouldn't be doing the podcast today if it weren't for the investment and the partnership.
So thank you to them, I will say.
Absolutely. But there's many other groups in Chevron. I could go on for 20 minutes listing out all of the groups we're already starting to work with, and there's a lot of energy across the entire company for this. So that's what is most exciting to me.
That gives me inspiration as well.
Great.
Thank you. I am taking you over to the disruptive question.
Now it's time for the disruptive questions.
Is earning money on the green transition important if it makes the process slower?
Good question. And the money, listen, we talk about growing these businesses to scale. We refer to them as businesses. Businesses need to generate returns. There are other drivers here for us. We are focused on how much carbon we can take out of the system at the lowest possible cost, our system, but also other industrial systems that are out there. But if we're not able to generate a return as a private enterprise, it's not sustainable. So while that returns focus does require us to be disciplined, might require us not to invest as broadly as we would if that weren't there and you didn't care about returns. This is a multi-decade challenge. That's how long this is going to take. That's why we have 2050 targets and 2070 targets. To do that in a sustainable way requires some profit, being able to generate attractive returns. So I take the point that if you're too concerned with the returns piece, you might go too slowly, and we need to balance that. But to make this work for the decades to come, there has to be a return for the companies that are involved. The economics are very, very important to this.
It kind of feels good in a way because it's more healthy for everybody involved in that case.
It is, yeah, it is.
What do you believe that renewables will be profitable?
Yeah, renewables are already profitable. And I think we take a look at these new businesses, and there are going to be cases where we'll invest in something that might not be profitable today, but we can see a path to profitability at some point in the future. And that goes back to the risk tolerance. These are a bit different than some of our traditional businesses, which are more mature and are earning a return today. But that is the nature of building any new business. Is you invest money on the front end, and you're in the red, and you keep working at it and working at it and working at it, and over time, costs come down, technology advances, and you start to generate a profit.
If we look back at solar and wind, how they become became profitable in a sense. Would you say that it was the scalability or the quality that made them profitable?
It was, I guess, on quality, I think of quality in terms of the technology, right? The technology advanced, the costs for generating renewable power declined much quicker than folks thought they would. You go back 20 years and folks thought solar would always be at this cost and would never come down. Well, clearly that wasn't the case. And we see that in our traditional business all the time. A well we drilled in the Permian Basin, 10 years ago cost much more than a well that we're drilling today, because we're learning, we're applying technology, we're getting more efficient. And to your second point, the scale is also important, and that's important for these businesses as well. So it will take both of those. And while you start with a certain level of policy support here to get these going, tax incentives, direct investment by governments, that gets this started, and then over time you'll see costs decline significantly across this space, and the profit will be more realizable, and these businesses will stand on their own. These are very high growth sectors because of the challenges associated with climate change and carbon.
I mean, there is an interesting example if you look at, if we go back to what we talked about earlier about collaboration and the importance of working all together. For example, oil and gas are drilling, I think, 70,000 wells per year still. Geothermal is drilling 200 wells per year. I mean, there must be so much intellectual property that can be shared here so we can have a better scalability and a better knowledge, all of this. How do we make sure that these people talk to each other so that we really get that scalability, that knowledge across?
Well, I think it goes back to there's a natural fit, in the capabilities that we have, subsurface capabilities, with a business like geothermal. And we've been involved in the geothermal business for many, many years. We used to have very large investments in the Asia Pacific region in high heat geothermal, not low heat, but high heat. And now we're working on more advanced geothermal applications. And so I think there's a natural bridge with the exploration and production energy companies, oil and gas companies today, and some new technologies like geothermal. I think the market, I always say the market works, right? And so while I'd like it to accelerate in some of these spaces, geothermal in particular, as that opportunity becomes more and more defined, and it is, I see geothermal really taking off here in the next several years. Companies will be drawn to that, and will be drawn to invest in that because they see an opportunity to add something to that, and they see an opportunity to generate a return over time. So I think that will happen naturally. I love the investments that I'll go back to Tech Ventures. Our approach is to invest in a lot of smaller companies that are out there that are working on the front end of this technology, so we can scale these to much larger businesses over time. And there are many other companies that are doing the same thing.
But I guess it goes down also, I 100% agree with you, but I also guess it goes down to matching the people as well, the entrepreneurial agendas and those things. Sometimes you just need to put people in a room, force them into a room and start listening to each other. And I think that, is this something that, who should take responsibility? Should the new technologies take responsibility? Yeah? Both.
You're a partner of ours, and although we're a company of 36,000, employees, and Baseload is a company of, I think it's how many?
50.
50 today. We're partners. It's not that Chevron has the answers to everything, and Chevron is going to tell Baseload this is exactly what you should be doing. You should be working, with us and influencing our strategy. And this goes back to working in a different way. So I'll give you an example. Why can't we move people between the two organizations? Why couldn't we take someone from Baseload and have them here? Most of our folks are based in Houston on an assignment, actually working in the New Energies organization, and vice versa. What if we put somebody from New Energies over in Sweden to work in baseload capital?
I would love to have them.
I would love to do that too. And that's but that's something we have not done in the past. Imagine the learning that you get when you actually spent time working in the company day to day, going to meetings on both sides. You learn more about how we think about things, and we would learn more about how baseload thinks about things. I think there's a huge opportunity there.
I see that we both get fired up here.
Yes, it's something that we're looking at.
Yeah.
It's something
But I think that, I mean, we're talking about baseload now, baseload and Chevron, but I would like to elevate this one to, again, like we need to have the collaborations, and I think that to all the people who are listening out there, investors, developers, all the different kind of renewable techniques, I think that this kind of open conversation is something to be inspired about. I would like to shed a light on just that, the conversation, for example, that baseload and Chevron has had. It's been very open-minded, it's very easy, it's more collaborative, it's entrepreneurial. Let's find solutions. Yeah. And that's a mindset, I believe, that we need to have in order to do this transition. It's not the glass cannot be half full. It needs to be, or actually it's the opposite. The glass cannot be, how do you say?
Half empty.
Half empty. Yeah. It cannot be half empty. It needs to be half full all the time.
I agree. And it's a different way of working. We do a lot. There's a lot of collaboration today, right? We have a lot of partnerships, a lot of suppliers that we work with, a lot of customers in our traditional business. We work with governments all over the world. But I think we need to have a different view of that. And and look, Zero Week this week's a great example of that. OGCI is a great example. Getting companies together to really think about collaboration in a different way is very, very important. And it goes back to your question about sometimes, we break through biases and perceptions that are out there. And I understand, there's some of those that we will never change. But really, the more we can communicate, what we're doing, how we're doing it, get our people out there talking, meeting to folks, I think we can take collaboration to an entirely different level. And that's how we'll resolve this issue. I'm very optimistic about solving this. I know we will solve it, but we will solve it much more quickly and much more effectively if we work together. It sounds very idealistic and high level. Please don't hit the button.
I won't because I truly believe it.
It's true. It is true. But saying it's one thing, doing it is another. So it's my responsibility.
But we can push it. You can push it and say that if we don't have collaboration, what we?
Yes.
Do you want?
There you go. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Sunshine from me to you.
Okay.
Because of that, I think it's very important, and I think that the words from you and like representing Chevron are also very important to all the people out there working for the green transition and the switch.
And doing a podcast like this is important. I jumped on this because we're helping to get the word out, and hopefully folks will hear this and they'll hear what I'm saying, what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to do it, and folks will reach out to us, and we'll partner in a very different way.
Promise me that when you have an employee, the first employee that says, "I heard you on the Switch, Not Another podcast, and I got really inspired. I wanted to work here." Can you call me then?
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Good. Ooh, that's the goal of mine now.
Absolutely.
In the end, now I would like you to get the chance to give sunshine to an initiative, an organization, or a person that you really would like to elevate and give some
sunshine.
Love
well, I talked about our CTV organization. I mean, there are many others that I could highlight, in the company. I guess we had an event here. Maybe it's a group of companies, and Baseload Capital would be one of them. I actually met Alexander here for the first time, and he flew in all the way from Sweden for really one engagement, just because our executive leadership team was here in the ION, and we flew in a lot of companies, in the geothermal space, battery storage, hydrogen, carbon capture, and many others to really interact with our executives. And it was our Tech Ventures group really put all of that together. But to see everybody in the room, Alexander, to fly that far, it's a long way from Sweden to Houston. to engage in that. I was really struck, by that. And so I'd give sunshine to that whole group of really innovators, those sets of companies, very small companies that are working on huge things with huge companies. And to see them all get up there and do a very short pitch on here's what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're working with Chevron was very, very inspirational to me. And I think that is such an important part of being successful in these spaces. So I give Chevron out to all of the innovators that are out there working in all these different spaces. Is that okay?
That is okay. No, I'm not going to push anything. Don't worry. I think it's nice. I think it's good. It shows, again, collaboration. And also to find these kind of, I think it's important to find, we've been living with COVID for so long.
Yes.
I think these meeting points where people discuss and talk and meet each other is very important.
I agree.
So.
And you could see it, this week when you're really starting to get people face to face. It makes a huge difference. So hopefully we can continue that.
I really hope so.
Yes.
But this podcast cannot be continued for so long. We're coming to an end.
Okay.
And it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really hope it comes across what actually Chevron is doing to shed a light on the green transition. So thank you for that, and also thank you for showing that collaboration is possible through over industries. And also thank you for answering my questions in a very honest and precise way.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it. It's my first podcast.
Really?
Yes, my first.
I'm happy to have you.
You're my first podcast, so thank you very much.
You are good material for a podcast, so I can recommend.
Thank you very much.